What's up, Chef? Jake here. I talk about indie crossovers on this channel a lot, like probably too much. But sometimes I feel like that niche is pretty limited. Like 90% of those crossovers come in the form of fighting games, which I'm fine with since that's the type of game I enjoy, but I could see it being frustrating. Not only does that pretty effectively lock out gamers who enjoy a more peaceful experience, but it also locks out franchises and IP that those players enjoy, which is a massive bummer. So what if we had a game that didn't do that? What if there was an indie crossover that wasn't a fighting game? Or Super Indie Carts? Or Runbow? That's what we're going to discuss today. Let's get into it. Before we get to the meaty stuff, we should probably clarify a genre. It can't be a racing game, since that already exists and it's boring. Most other things, like an FPS or an RPG, would have the same pitfalls as a fighting game, although an RPG would also be sick. So I propose a party game, specifically something in the style of Mario Party. That's something bright and cheery that people can get behind, even if the roster doesn't need to have real fighting experience. For now, we're going to focus on the roster specifically, simply for the reasons that I'm not exactly experienced in minigame design, and honestly this video is already bloated. With that out of the way, let's get to building this roster. So this is a brain-dead pick. Shovel Knight feels like an obligation at this point. He's been in everything, it only makes sense to chuck him into the party game. He's a super iconic character, and I feel no further need to explain myself. Just get him in. This one's not so brain dead, Nico from One Shot. If you've never played this game, Nico is a cute, not a cat that travels around a dying world in order to restore the sun. They're super beloved and they've got a lot of fans, but they aren't exactly a fantastic fighter. Thus, I think they make a lot of sense for the game where they don't have to fight. Sometimes this game gets a little dark, no pun intended, which may make it seem like it doesn't fit in such a jovial setting, but from my minimal experience, fans love to put Nico in happier situations, and their design would fit really well with this game, so I think it'll be okay. This is another character that feels like common sense. Let's talk about Lilac. She's from a game called Freedom Planet, which got really popular with the Sonic community upon release. And for good reason, it's pretty damn good. One could easily argue that she's the second lady of indie games, right behind Shantae. And, well, I guess Curly, but that's besides the point. Part of the reason I want to see Lilac is that Galaxy Trail is fairly easy to work with. I don't say that from experience, but Freedom Planet characters show up in their fair share of crossovers, like Indie Pogo and Super Indie Kart. She's kind of a no-brainer at this point. So One Step from Eden is a really interesting game. It's a roguelite in the style of the Mega Man Battle Network series, and it's super well beloved. However, it's kind of in an unfortunate position. Being a roguelite, it's in competition with games like Hades and Enter the Gungeon for other crossovers. Being a Mega-like, it's in competition with games like Mighty No. 9 and the Gunvolt series. That makes it pretty hard to justify giving it a slot in a fighting game, even if it really does deserve it. But the object here is to represent some of the games that don't make sense for stuff like Framemakers, so it's perfect. Plus, Saffron has a fantastic design, so she'd be super popular in a game like this. So representing Flash games is pretty difficult, because a lot of games and a lot of characters deserve the slot. That may make a character like Right Hand Man seem like a waste, but I disagree for a couple of reasons. One, Henry Stickmin's design on its own is pretty basic, so in a game where a character's arsenal isn't really a factor, Right Man Hand's cyborg form would be more distinct. Two, we need at least one bad guy, and Right Hand Man fills that role perfectly. Lastly, I've got another Flash character in mind, so don't freak out. So this is another franchise that people talk about a lot when it comes to fighting games, although personally I don't feel that fits. Forcing a character from Undertale to fight feels like it's counterintuitive to the game's message, so except for exceptions like Ralze, I really don't want the series to show up in Fray. However, a game where they don't have to fight and can just goof around fits pretty well in my opinion. Papyrus clearly fits the tone of a party game best, but I know most people recognize this game by Sans, so choosing between the two was really difficult. As such, I'm not going to. I propose the two show up as a team, working together as brothers to handle minigames and board traversal. So I've mentioned games that don't really fit the tone of certain crossovers a couple times now. Throwing a Bloodstained character into a game like this may seem like an example of that, but I've gotta disagree. Why? Because Bloodstained is the brain baby of this dude, Koji Igarashi, and he doesn't give a shit about tone. That's not a drag on him, his games are amazing, but that means you can get away with a lot when it comes to his characters. Hell, Miriam ended up in a fighting game where she throws down with this dude. I think Iga's A-okay with some weird collabs. So Hat Kid is a well-beloved character, and for good reason. She's easily the character that needs the second least explaining out of the whole roster. If you haven't played a Hat in time, it's a 3D platformer a la Super Mario Galaxy, and it performed insanely well. That's at least partially thanks to the protagonist, who is notoriously adorable. Her victory animations and potential for hijinks are reason enough to see the character join the party. So yeah, this is the other Flash character I wanted to see show up. Friday Night Funkin' is huge right now, and the boyfriend has quickly joined the upper echelon of Newgrounds characters, right up there with Pico and Tankman. He's got a fantastic design, and I'm willing to bet this hypothetical game could net at least a couple FNF fans if he showed up. Of course, other characters like the aforementioned Pico would also be sick, so if they got switched, it wouldn't break my heart.
Super Meatboy! Forever!
So Meatboy is an odd case, because he's a character from a game that realistically belongs with other high-action games. But Meatboy himself really struggles to keep up. He's got a punch in Meatboy Forever, and Indie Pogo's seemingly doing a pretty good job of hiding it, but this dude is absolutely not a fighter. Thus, I'm kinda hoping adding him to a game like this will get some old-fashioned indie fans in, since this roster kinda leans toward newer stuff. For example, so Unbeatable is easily the most niche game on this roster, but I gotta practice a little self-care in this pitch. I managed to not throw Gunvolt in here, so y'all are gonna have to let me have this. Unbeatable is a fantastic looking rhythm game that got kickstarted like last month, and it has stolen my heart. The main protagonist, Beat, has a super likable design, and I think she'd do a good job of filling in the I really don't fit to the point of being funny archetype, like Astaroth and Pac-Man Fever. It's kinda weird to have two rhythm game characters on such a small roster, but hear me out. I don't care. If there's any character that encapsulates the point of this concept, Madeline is it. Celeste is a beautiful game that made waves back in 2018, so much so that it got nominated for Game of the Year. But the protagonist, Madeline, doesn't have much moveset potential at all. But despite that, people are still constantly asking to see her in games like Fraymakers and Indie Pogo, which I feel is an incredible sign for how much this game is loved. Personally, I'd rather see her in the context of a party game, because she's a character with tons of personality, Between her design, her character, and her dark side battling, there's plenty of reason to love this character. So I'd love it if she could show up here. So that's a lot, and it's more than anyone could reasonably expect from an indie game. But this indie game isn't real, so I'm going to go a little further. A lot of these games don't bother with unlockable characters, since most people want every single competitive possibility at their fingertips immediately. Fortunately, this isn't a competitive game, which means that we can get a little stupid with our unlockable picks. So without stalling any further, let's go through those real quick. Stella is from a game called Spiritfarer, which is really sweet and a lot of people love it, and I have not played it. Her design is really cute, and I think she'd fit well, but I'm not going to pretend I have a lot to say about her. Just put her in. Robin is from Iconoclasts, which is one of the best indie games I've ever played. I'd love to see her show up in a fighting game, but her whole thing is emoting silently, and she's adorable, which I take as evidence that she'd make for a great party game character. Crag is from Rivals of Aether, and he's easily the most memed character on that game's roster. He's really well beloved though, and I chose him because he's a lot more jovial than characters like Zetterburn, without being as constant in crossovers as Orcane. This one was obvious, and I'd be totally remiss if I didn't feature the Goose. It's a maniacal psychopath known for causing chaos, and hot damn, if that doesn't sound perfect for a game like Mario Party, I don't know what to tell you. The Goose is the worst, and that's why he's the best pick I have. So yeah, I think this game could be pretty sick. I talk about this a lot, but games like this have a ton of potential, so I really hope they happen someday. Thank you guys for watching. I'm gonna have to stop this video here. This video was a lot of fun to make, since I wasn't tied to any pre-existing idea or project and didn't really feel the need to ground myself. So I hope y'all enjoyed it. If you did, and you want to see more content on Hypothetical Indie Party, pending title, or other crossover games like Framemakers, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell. For those of you who are already subscribed, thank you so much. We just hit 150 subs and it's really cool to see. I'm really not good at sappy displays of gratitude, but you guys really have my thanks. I'd better get going, but I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.